I always thought I would die old, maybe at a beach house I hadn't bought yet, with a drink in one hand and my quarterly report in the other. Not like this. Not in the middle of a gala, the night of my company's 10-year anniversary, surrounded by champagne and applause. Not in a crimson designer dress with a knife buried in my spine. I didn't even see their faces, just a blur of shadows and precision. 3 of them. Silent. Surgical. I collapsed between polished marble and camera flashes. Time slowed. My vision blurred. But just before the darkness took me, I caught one detail, a gold chain tucked under a black suit collar, and a patch stitched into the inner lining. Something military. Foreign. Then nothing. Just the sound of my own blood spilling onto the floor I paid to have imported from Italy. Death was supposed to be final. But I woke up in my old apartment, my bare studio with the leaky faucet and the cracked tile near the fridge. My phone buzzed beside me. The date read 6 years earlier. My name blinked back at me from a college graduation email. I was 23. Alive. And terrified. The universe had given me a second chance. But not to fix mistakes, I had none. I'd built Titan Tech from nothing. No scandals. No enemies. No rivals strong enough to hire assassins. Which meant the threat wasn't about competition. It was something else. Something deeper. And it would come for me again if I didn't find out who they were. I moved differently this time. No wasted years climbing ladders, I launched the startup immediately, cutting every corner I already knew led to dead ends. I poured everything into it, but I also started looking, digging. Military connections. Contract killers. Black Ops units that had been disbanded but still whispered about in certain forums. Then one day, a name surfaced repeatedly in anonymous threads, Ethan Vale. Ex-intelligence. Now private sector. Shadowy affiliations. Dangerous. And linked to a defense contractor with ties to the exact patch I'd seen in my final seconds. I didn't reach out. I made him come to me. I posted a fake request for cybersecurity consultation on a dark web-adjacent hiring network I knew he monitored. He showed up 3 days later, tall, unreadable, and dressed like he belonged to every dangerous room I'd ever feared. "You're playing with fire," he said when I greeted him. "That's the point," I replied. He studied me too long. "You don't look like someone who needs protection." "That's because I'm not asking for protection." "Then what are you asking for?" I leaned forward. "Help me find the people who want me dead." He didn't blink. Didn't flinch. But I saw the slight tilt of his head. I'd surprised him. Good. He didn't say yes. But he didn't walk out, either. And 3 days later, he sent me a burner phone with a text that read, "We talk at midnight. Be alone." I met him on the rooftop of an abandoned building downtown. It was reckless. Stupid. Thrilling. I was already wet with anticipation, adrenaline, or maybe it was something more dangerous. He stood with his back to me, looking over the skyline. "You've made enemies," he said. "Not yet," I replied. "But I will." He turned then, and his eyes burned through me like he already knew things I hadn't said out loud. "Why do you want this so badly?" "Because I died once." That got his attention. He didn't ask what I meant. He just stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "You think I'm the key?" "I think you're the only person who might know where to start." "And what if I'm one of them?" I didn't back down. "Then I'll kill you first." He laughed then, low and sharp. "You've got a death wish." "No," I said. "I've got a deadline." That night, he kissed me. Hard. Unexpected. Like we both knew it was the beginning of something dangerous. I didn't stop him. I pulled him closer. Let him press me against the rusted rails. Let his hands explore what the world would never see, the fear, the fire, the fight. And when we broke apart, breathless and raw, he whispered, "We start tomorrow. But if you run, I won't chase you." "Good," I said. "Because I don't run. I hunt." The next morning, I woke up with bruises on my lips and fingerprints on my waist. The kind only a dangerous man leaves when he forgets to hold back. I didn't regret it. I'd felt alive. Raw. But I also knew better than to let lust cloud judgment. Ethan Vale was not a man you trusted. He was a weapon you pointed, and hoped wouldn't turn on you. The burner phone buzzed at 6 a.m. sharp. First target. Midtown. Be ready in 1 hour. No greeting. No warning. Just a location and a countdown. I threw on black slacks, tied my hair back, and strapped a knife under my blazer. I wasn't just investigating anymore. I was hunting. Ethan picked me up in a car that didn't belong to him. He didn't explain. I didn't ask. The less I knew, the safer I was, or maybe that was the lie he'd tell someone else. The first man we followed was a former logistics coordinator for a private military group, disbanded after corruption allegations that were never proven. Ethan said he handled special deliveries, which was code for untraceable weapons and human assets. "He's just a pawn," Ethan muttered, eyes locked on the man exiting a government building. "But pawns talk when they're scared." "And how do you plan to scare him?" I asked. Ethan smirked. "That's your job." We cornered him in a parking garage. Ethan blocked the exit. I stepped into the light. "Hi, Martin," I said, reading the name off the ID clipped to his belt. "We need to talk about Titan Tech." His face drained of color. "I don't know anything." "You do." I stepped closer. "You delivered something 6 years from now. You just don't know it yet." He looked ready to bolt. Ethan drew his weapon. "Just enough to show the holster." 10 seconds, he said coldly. "Start remembering." Martin cracked. He mentioned a string of payments routed through a shell company, used to fund an operation codenamed Red Haze. That was the first time I heard the name. But it wouldn't be the last. Red Haze. The operation that ended my life. The next few weeks were a blur of shadowy meetings, forged documents, and late-night strategy sessions in Ethan's apartment. I worked during the day, building Titan Tech again, but this time smarter, faster, dirtier if I had to be. At night, we hunted. I started sleeping there, mostly for safety, but partly because of him. He was addictive. Quiet when he wasn't dangerous, cold when he wasn't on fire. He never touched me without permission. But when he did, it was like he was staking a claim no one else could touch. I hated how much I wanted him. I hated how safe I felt when he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world worth dying for. One night, I caught him watching me as I slept on the couch. "That's creepy," I whispered without opening my eyes. "You talk in your sleep," he said, his voice low. "You say things I've never heard before." I opened one eye. "Like what?" "Like how you died." I sat up. "You don't believe me." "I believe everything," he said quietly. "I just don't know what scares me more, that it happened. Or that I wasn't there to stop it." The room fell silent. Then he crossed it in 2 steps, knelt in front of me, and kissed me like I was something fragile pretending to be steel. I let him. I wanted to feel human. But the thing about love, or something close to it, is that it makes you vulnerable. And we were being watched. We didn't know it yet. But Red Haze had noticed the ripples. They knew someone was tracing old connections. One night, after I left a fake job interview to sniff out a contact, I returned to Ethan's place to find the door cracked open. My stomach turned. My fingers twitched toward the knife in my purse. I stepped inside, slow and silent. "Ethan?" No answer. The lights were off. My heels clicked against hardwood. I passed the kitchen. Empty. The bathroom door was ajar. I reached for it, then a hand slammed against the wall behind me. I jumped, spun. And there he was, shirtless, gun in hand, breath ragged. "Don't ever walk in like that again," he snapped. "What the hell happened?" He stared at me, eyes unreadable. "Someone left a warning on the balcony." "What kind of warning?" "A bullet. With your name etched into the casing." My chest tightened. "They're close, aren't they?" He nodded once. "Too close." Then his hands were on me again, rough, desperate. Not passion. Not love. Survival. A need to feel something alive while death circled the building. And I let it happen. I let him drag me into the dark and strip away every layer of control I had left. Because we were in too deep now. And the deeper we went, the closer we came to the truth. Or the next bullet. We didn't sleep that night. Not in the peaceful, dream-filled way. I dozed in his arms for an hour at most, his hand resting over the pistol beneath his pillow, his body always half tense, half ready. I was beginning to understand Ethan Vale. He wasn't a man who could afford peace. And now, neither was I. The bullet with my name on it sat on the kitchen table like a paperweight from hell. My fingers brushed the cold brass surface over and over as if the engraving might change. "Where did it come from?" I asked. "Threw it up onto the balcony," Ethan said. "From a building across the street. They didn't even care if I saw. They're taunting us. Or testing how close they can get." That day, we made a list. Names from my old life. Employees. Clients. Partners. Even the ones I trusted. Especially the ones I trusted. The pattern was getting clearer. Red haze didn't just kill for money. They erased people who knew too much. Or people who might someday get in their way. And I was both. The next lead took us into government contracts. My company, Titan Tech, had landed one in year 4 of my last life. But I hadn't known the full scope of what we'd been supplying. Now, with foresight, I traced the false names used in the purchasing logs. They all funneled back to the same shell firm, Westpath Strategies. We found one of their former auditors living off-grid in a cabin north of the city. Ethan insisted I stay behind. I insisted harder. "You're not bulletproof," he snapped. "And you're not in charge," I shot back. "Either we're partners or we're nothing." That shut him up. Not because he liked the answer, but because he hated how much it mattered. We took a rental car and drove for hours. Halfway there, the tension broke. I was picking fights just to feel in control, and he was too tired to keep biting his tongue. "You don't get to make every decision," I said, arms crossed. "You're not my handler." "I'm not trying to be." He didn't look at me. "But you forget that you've died before." "I haven't." "That makes me more careful." I was quiet for a moment. "You sound like you care." "I do." My heart thudded. "Then say it." He glanced at me, one hand on the wheel. "I care about you." "Say it like you mean it." He pulled the car over. Dead stop. Middle of nowhere. Then he turned, reached across the console, and kissed me. Not rushed, not angry, slow, deep, certain. Like he had no intention of letting anything happen to me. When he pulled back, his voice was low. "I care about you. More than I should." I whispered, "Then stop pretending you don't." The rest of the drive was silent. Warm. Steady. Like we were finally breathing in sync. The auditor's cabin was hidden behind a thicket of pine trees and reinforced steel. Ethan scanned for traps. I watched the treetops. The man was twitchy. Former accountant turned paranoid recluse. He cracked his door open with a shotgun in hand. "We just want to talk," Ethan said calmly. "You're not from Westpath?" "No. But we're digging them up." The man studied us. Then nodded us inside. He told us everything he could remember. Invoices that didn't match. Payments that arrived before deals were made. Code names. One of them stood out, Project Gemini. They were obsessed with it, he said. Top secret, even for them. What was it? I asked. I don't know. But it was enough for them to start tying up loose ends once the audit started. That's why I left. Faked a heart attack. I figured they'd ignore a dead man. They won't, Ethan said. Eventually, they come for everyone. That night, back in the city, I lay awake in Ethan's bed while he showered. I replayed every piece of information. Gemini. Red haze. West path. But it wasn't until I remembered one tiny detail from my death, the accent of the man who whispered something over my dying body, that everything snapped into place. He'd said, clean exit. No witnesses. In a British accent. Not American. Not local. British. Ethan. I called. He came out, towel wrapped around his waist, brow furrowed. What? The man who killed me. I remember his voice. That's good. He was British. Ethan froze. Then, slowly, he said, that narrows it down. Does it? I asked. Because I think you already knew that. He didn't deny it. Just walked toward me, leaned close, and whispered, I didn't tell you everything. But I will. Just, not tonight. Why not? Because the second I say it, we won't be able to pretend this is just about survival anymore. I looked at him. Really looked. Then don't pretend. He kissed me again. This time, it wasn't fire. It was gravity. He pulled me down with him. Into the sheets. Into the war. Into something neither of us could name yet, but both of us knew we wouldn't survive without. By the next morning, everything had changed. Ethan hadn't told me the whole truth, but I had stopped caring. Or maybe I cared too much. The problem with falling for someone like him was that you were never sure which part of the story they were leaving out to protect you. And which part they were leaving out because it would change everything. I knew one thing for certain, he wasn't going to lie to me much longer. Because we were getting too close to the center of the storm. I watched him sleep for a while. He looked younger in sleep. Less dangerous. But even unconscious, his body was alert, one hand always inches from the drawer where he kept a gun. He trusted me. But he didn't trust the world. And I was starting to see why. Because even I didn't fully trust myself anymore. The woman I was becoming didn't belong to boardrooms or keynote stages. She belonged to the shadows now. I got up and started digging deeper into Project Gemini. I tapped every connection I still had, academic databases, government archives, a few old colleagues who owed me favors from my previous life. Most of them thought I was chasing a conspiracy theory. But one sent me a file. Encrypted. No sender. Just a link with the name Gemini, echo chain. It was a military-grade research paper on artificial identity manipulation. Fake fingerprints. Surgical facial modifications. Voice pattern training. The project wasn't about killing people. It was about replacing them. I stared at the screen, frozen. Red haze hadn't been targeting me because I was a threat. They'd been targeting me because they needed to wear my face. Just then, Ethan walked in, freshly showered, shirt half-buttoned, and caught me reading the file. He didn't ask how I got it. He just said, "You weren't supposed to find that." Too late. I was going to tell you. Tonight. Who are they replacing? He looked down. You. And 3 others. All CEO-level figures with access to defense technologies. But you were the only one they couldn't fully replicate. Too many layers. Too much unpredictability. So they killed me instead. He nodded. And you knew this? I found out after the first time I saw your name linked to Westpath. I didn't want to believe it at first. Then I saw your face pop up on one of their scans months after your assassination. It wasn't you. But it was close enough to fool everyone. My skin went cold. They already tried? They failed. But only because your board didn't authorize the facial recognition clearances. You built too many firewalls. You saved yourself without even knowing. I sat down. My hands were shaking. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because I didn't know how you'd handle it. And because the deeper you got, the more they'd come for you again. I'm not scared of them. You should be. There was silence between us, thick and heavy. Then I asked, who's running it? Ethan hesitated. A man named Alden Graves. Former MI6. Now private contractor. Red Hayes answers to him. Where is he? London. But you can't go yet. It's suicide without proof. I don't care. You should. Because if you walk into that building without something to trade, you won't walk out. I stood. Then give me something to trade. He stepped closer, took my hand. I'll go with you. I'll get you to him. But we do it my way. His fingers traced my wrist. His other hand curled around my waist. You trust me? He asked. No, I whispered. But I'm starting to love you anyway. That night, we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. There was no desperation this time. No fear of bullets or shadows. Just heat. Slow and brutal and blinding. He took his time. I didn't beg, but I broke. And he kissed me like he knew exactly how I'd fall apart. After, he held me tighter than before. I felt his heartbeat against my spine. For the first time, I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. It was about a future. And if I had to burn every last remnant of Red Haze to the ground to get it, I would. With Ethan at my side. But we weren't the only ones preparing. Because across the ocean, Alden Graves had just received an alert. The Phoenix was alive. Again. And this time, she was hunting him. The flight to London was booked under fake names and paid for in cash. Ethan handled every detail like he'd done it 1,000 times before, which, frankly, he probably had. He didn't talk much during the trip. Neither did I. But our silence wasn't empty. It was loaded with everything we weren't ready to say aloud. That we might not come back. That this wasn't just about revenge anymore. That if either of us died, the other would break. When we landed, it was raining, of course it was. And Ethan led us through narrow back alleys and unmarked doors until we reached a flat hidden behind a laundromat in Soho. The man who opened the door was maybe 60, unshaven, and drunk by noon. But when he saw Ethan, he sobered instantly. Bloody hell. Didn't think I'd see your face again? Didn't plan on showing it, Ethan replied. We need access to Graves' dossier. Now. The man, someone Ethan only called Fox, let us in. The place was a mess, walls plastered with newspapers and red string maps that looked like a madman's conspiracy, but the tech was elite. Fox pulled up a biometric file so detailed it made my skin crawl. Graves was meticulous. He changed his face every 6 months. His accent slightly shifted. Even his fingerprints were periodically replaced through skin grafting. But one thing never changed, his eyes. Cold, calculating, the eyes of a man who never lost. He runs an auction, Fox explained. Black market identities. Medical files. Company shares. Even people. When's the next one? I asked. 48 hours. And you're not invited. Then we'll crash it, Ethan said flatly. Got a name on the guest list we can borrow? Fox sighed and pointed to a file tagged with a red skull icon. Only one that's dead. You'll have to pass as his mistress. How charming, I muttered. Ethan, I didn't know you liked watching me play submissive. He leaned in and whispered, only if I get to watch them squirm when they realize you're the one with teeth. The next night was a blur of forged passports, hidden weapons, and long, heated looks across narrow hotel rooms. Ethan was tense. Focused. But when we were alone, his guard slipped. He touched me like I was the last piece of clarity he had left. We didn't speak of what might happen if we failed. We spoke through touch. Through bruises kissed and bitten skin. Through whispered promises he didn't know he'd make until I pulled them from his throat. On the night of the auction, I wore a crimson dress with a slit high enough to draw every eye and a blade strapped to each thigh. Ethan wore a tailored suit and a loaded smile. We entered through a private club on the river, passed through facial scans, voice checks, and finally, an underground ballroom filled with the richest and deadliest people in the world. Graves was there. Older than I remembered, but still unmistakably him. I felt my breath catch. Ethan squeezed my hand once. Not yet, he murmured. Let him think he's safe. The auction began. Ethan played the part of the quiet buyer. I played the part of the spoiled mistress. Graves passed by us once. He looked me in the eye, and didn't recognize me. That should have made me feel powerful. Instead, it made me furious. That he had erased me so easily. That I had once died and he didn't even flinch. By the time the final item was wheeled out, a memory drive labeled Gemini Core, I knew what we had to do. Stealing it would expose everything. But it would also blow our cover. I leaned toward Ethan. Now? Now. I stood, smiled sweetly at the security guard, then drove my heel into his throat. Chaos erupted. Ethan shot out the lights. I grabbed the drive. Graves turned, our eyes met, and in that moment, he knew. She's alive, he shouted, voice echoing through the black. Kill her. But we were already gone, disappearing into the night, into the sewer tunnels Fox had mapped beneath the city. Soaking wet, hearts pounding, blood on Ethan's sleeve and dirt on my knees, we emerged in the early dawn light with the drive still clutched in my fist. We had it. Everything we needed to expose red haze. But Graves had seen my face. And now he wouldn't rest until I was dead again. Only this time I wasn't running. I was ready to end it. And I was no longer alone. We went dark for 2 weeks. Changed phones, locations, even names. The Gemini Core was encrypted with layers so dense it nearly cooked Ethan's laptop. We set up shop in a borrowed safe house outside Edinburgh, surrounded by fog, trees, and silence. It was the kind of place people forgot existed. Fox stayed in London, feeding us updates through dead drops and burner signals. Graves had put out a bounty. 5 million. For me, alive or dead. The good news? We were now certain he was scared. The bad news? Everyone was looking for us. Ethan worked through the nights decoding the drive while I analyzed the files one by one. What we found wasn't just criminal, it was monstrous. The Gemini project wasn't just about replacing people. It was about rewriting the world order. CEOs, diplomats, tech visionaries, media moguls, all subtly swapped out, erased, or controlled. I found one file labeled Phoenix 1. Me. They had my full behavioral profile. Everything I had ever published, spoken, or searched. But there was a note at the bottom, unstable. Risk of divergence too high. Terminate. My chest went tight. They hadn't just wanted to replace me, they had labeled me defective. Uncontrollable. And that's why they killed me. You were too strong, Ethan said when I showed him. They couldn't use you, so they had to destroy you. But I'm still here. Damn right you are. He pulled me onto his lap. For the first time in days, we let the tension snap. My fingers gripped his shirt. His mouth crashed against mine. We burned through hours, no words, just skin and sweat and desperation. Every kiss was a promise we hadn't had the courage to make until now. After, lying tangled in blankets and adrenaline, Ethan whispered, "I love you." I stared at him. "Say it again." "I love you." My voice cracked. "Even if I fail?" "Especially then." We cracked the drive on day 14. Inside was a kill list, names, faces, execution dates. 3 of them hadn't happened yet. I recognized one. Olivia Chen, CEO of a cybersecurity firm. The other 2 were newer players in biotech and AI. All of them posed threats to Red Haze's control. "If we can warn them," I said, "we can rally them. If we get to them in time." We split up. Ethan would go to LA to warn Olivia. I'd go to Berlin for the biotech CEO. We'd meet again in Zurich with the AI specialist. It was a gamble, but we were out of options. Before we parted, Ethan pressed his forehead to mine. "You come back to me," he said. "Always." Berlin was cold. I posed as an investor. Gained access to the biotech building through a fake pitch deck and a forged badge. I found the CEO, Matthias Voss, in his lab. He didn't believe me at first. Not until I showed him the drive. Not until I showed him his own death date, next week. "What do we do?" he asked, pale and shaking. "We don't die," I said. "We fight back." By the time I reached Zurich, Ethan wasn't there. No calls. No messages. My gut twisted. I stayed in a hotel under a false name, waiting. 48 hours passed. Nothing. Then I got the package. A single photo. Ethan. Bound. Bleeding. The note was typed. "Come alone. Or he dies." I stared at it for a long time. Then I stood, packed the drive, and slipped a blade into my boot. They wanted a phoenix. They were about to get one with claws. The meeting point was a derelict train station on the edge of Zurich, abandoned and shrouded in fog. I arrived just before midnight, dressed in black, the Gemini core drive tucked into a hidden compartment in my coat. The silence was oppressive, thick with the weight of something waiting to snap. I walked onto the platform with slow, deliberate steps. "I'm here," I called out. A figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't Graves. It was a woman. Tall, gloved, her face obscured by a scarf and sunglasses. "Hand over the drive," she said, her voice sharp and calm. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Alive. For now. But not for long if you stall." I didn't flinch. "I want to see him first." She tossed a phone at my feet. I picked it up and hit play. It was a video. Ethan, bound to a chair, blood on his face, one eye swollen shut, but still alive. Still fighting. "Don't give them anything," he rasped in the video. "Don't you dare." The screen went black. I looked up. "You have 5 seconds," she warned. I stepped forward, then dropped to my knees. Not to surrender. To access the hidden pocket in my boot. In one fluid motion, I flicked the knife at her feet and lunged. She reached for her gun, but I was faster. My blade sank into her thigh, and she screamed. As she fell, I grabbed her wrist and twisted until her weapon clattered to the ground. "Where is he?" I shouted. She spat blood and hissed, "You're too late." I didn't wait. I knocked her out cold and ran toward the warehouse marked in the background of the video. I'd memorized every detail: graffiti, broken windows, the faint echo of a train line nearby. It was a trap, I knew that. But I was done running. I burst through the door just as Graves raised a gun to Ethan's head. "Stop!" I shouted. He turned, eyes wide for a fraction of a second before he smiled. "So predictable," he said. "Just like before." "This time I'm not the same woman," I said, stepping closer. And you're not going to walk away. You think you're a threat, he scoffed. You're a glitch. An echo. I smiled coldly. Echoes can shatter glass. Then I threw the flash grenade. Ethan turned his head just in time. Graves did not. The explosion sent him stumbling. I lunged, knocked the gun from his hand, and drove my elbow into his throat. He fell. I grabbed Ethan and cut his ropes with the blade still stained from the woman's blood. Can you walk? I asked. I can run, he rasped. We made it out just before Graves' men realized what happened. Fox was waiting in a stolen car around the corner. He drove like hell while Ethan bled into my lap and I held the Gemini core against my chest like it was my heart. We had what we needed. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Graves had survived. And now he knew I wouldn't stop. Not until every name on that drive was safe. Not until every person who had backed the Gemini project was exposed. Not until Ethan and I were finally free. We went dark again. But this time, we weren't hiding. We were preparing for war. We launched the leaks at midnight. I didn't wait for boardroom approvals or legal clearance. I sent the Gemini core data to every major journalist, whistleblower network, and cybersecurity group on the planet. Within hours, the world began to crack. Faces on screens were matched against the real people who were missing, dead, or replaced. CEOs were arrested. Governments called emergency sessions. Entire companies collapsed overnight. Red haze was exposed. But Graves vanished. Ethan was still healing, his ribs bruised, his left arm in a sling, but his mind was sharp as ever. We relocated to a secure compound in Iceland, surrounded by allies and digital fences so tight not even a whisper could get in. I thought it would feel like victory. It didn't. Not yet. Not while Graves was still out there. Not while the last remnant of the machine that killed me was still breathing. Then came the message. A USB drive wrapped in black cloth, left on our doorstep with no trace of who delivered it. Inside, one video. Graves. You think this is over? He sneered. You think leaking our secrets changes the structure of power? It doesn't. You exposed pawns. The king is still on the board. The video ended with coordinates. An old castle in Austria. A challenge. A trap. But it didn't matter. I looked at Ethan. We end it. Together, he said. We packed light. Armor under silk. Blades under boots. I wore the same crimson dress from the auction. Let him see the ghost he failed to kill. The castle was crawling with mercenaries. But they hadn't expected a two-person war machine. Ethan disabled the power. I took out the guards. Room by room, hallway by hallway, we dismantled everything. Until it was just Graves. He stood at the top of the grand hall, gun in hand, coat fluttering behind him like some ridiculous villain from a spy film. You came all this way, he said. For what? Revenge? Closure? For justice, I said. And to make sure the world never forgets my name again. He fired first. I was faster. The bullet grazed my shoulder. Mine hit him dead center in the chest. He dropped, coughing blood, whispering, "You don't even know who really gave the order." I don't need to, I said. Because now, they'll be too scared to try again. I walked over and retrieved my bullet. One final souvenir. One final reminder that I had survived the machine designed to erase me. Ethan and I stood outside the burning ruins of the castle as the sirens approached. Not police. Allies. Witnesses. Truth seekers. The world would know what happened here. Not just that a criminal enterprise had been dismantled, but that the woman they tried to kill had come back stronger. That she had fought, bled, and risen. That she had burned everything down to build something new. Ethan wrapped his arm around me. It's over, he said. No, I whispered. It's just beginning. And this time, we were going to live. Out loud. In the light. Together. Forever. In the aftermath, the world wanted interviews. Headlines called me the Phoenix CEO. The woman who came back from the dead. I declined every offer. Let them speculate. Let them mythologize me. I didn't need to correct them because the truth was more unbelievable than anything they could imagine. Ethan and I returned to the city where it all began. Not to hide, but to rebuild. We bought back my old company, at triple its value, and every board member who had voted against me the first time was now begging for a seat at the table. I didn't give it to them. Instead, I promoted a team of women and misfits I had mentored from the shadows during my investigation. The kind of people who once would have been dismissed, just like I had been. Ethan became head of global security, and for the first time, I let someone else into the core of my empire. We worked in sync. Fought side by side. And yes, loved like we were running out of time. Our nights were fire. Our mornings were slow. There was no more hiding, no more soft footsteps in the dark, no more wondering when the past would come knocking. I woke up every day with his hand in mine, our future unwritten but finally ours to shape. We poured our energy into rebuilding not just a company, but a legacy. One rooted in transparency, in resilience, in refusing to let the powerful stay unchallenged. There were still whispers of other organizations like Red Haze, ghost networks operating in the shadows, but we had built defenses now. And I had allies watching from every corner of the world. We created scholarships for whistleblowers. Protection programs for targeted visionaries. We turned my story into a movement. A shield for the next girl who refused to stay silent. One night, after a long day at headquarters, Ethan took me to the rooftop, our rooftop, where it all began. The skyline shimmered below us. You know, he said, you once told me you'd never marry again. I laughed. I died, Ethan. I think that resets a few vows. He dropped to one knee, pulled out a ring with a sapphire so deep it looked like the night sky. Then marry me. For real this time. Not for protection. Not because the world is on fire. Marry me because you lived. I didn't hesitate. Yes. And just like that, I stopped being the woman they tried to erase. I became the woman they could never forget. The one who rose. The one who ruled. The one who loved. The wedding was held in Lake Como, where the water was still, the sky endless, and the world felt quiet enough to breathe. We didn't invite anyone out of obligation. Only those who had bled beside us, rebuilt beside us, believed when no one else did. I wore a gown that shimmered like the first dawn after war, and Ethan looked at me like I was everything he'd fought to protect. There were no bodyguards, no escape plans, no guns tucked into garters. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt safe. When I walked down the aisle, I didn't just walk toward him. I walked away from every boardroom betrayal, every blood-soaked secret, every sleepless night wondering who would try to kill me next. And when he said, I do, I didn't hear a promise, I heard peace. After the ceremony, we toasted under candlelight while violins played and stars gathered like blessings overhead. We danced slowly, shamelessly, surrounded by laughter and champagne and all the beautiful things we thought we'd never deserve. That night, in our villa overlooking the lake, Ethan kissed me like it was the first time, and I let myself fall, not out of fear, but into the soft certainty of forever. We made love like it was a vow, a promise not just to each other but to the lives we'd saved, the darkness we'd outrun, and the empire we'd built from ash. Years passed. Our company became a global force for good, funding innovation, empowering survivors, exposing the corrupt. And I never stopped remembering. Not the blade that ended my first life, or the moment I opened my eyes in the second. Because that pain, that death, that betrayal, it gave me everything. It made me who I was. It brought me to him. And in this life, I wasn't running. I wasn't surviving. I was living. I was loving. And this time I got to choose how the story ended. I chose happily. I chose him. I chose me.